Community has always been core of our mission because we recognize that we can't achieve anything in our core mission of sustainable economic prosperity if there isn't a community and a set of assets in community that supports all of us to pursue that goal of prosperity for all. This amazing picture was taken by my college roommate after the devastation of the tornado in Mayfield, Kentucky last year, the next county over from where he grew up. It's just an amazing photo of that balance point between the utter devastation that just came through and the symbols of hope and unity in the rising sun that yet remain behind. We've come out of this economic cataclysm in many measurable ways. The total jobs in our state have bounced back to almost where they were, and in almost every sector. Interestingly, the only exception to that bounce back for the most part is in healthcare, which of course has been traumatized by the last 3 years, and I think, I dare say, many have just suffered from extraordinary burnout in healthcare, and keeping those people and getting others to come in is very challenging. But we've bounced back from that cliff, that cataclysm. And as I said earlier in kicking off today, I'm hopeful. But I don't think hopeful is just an emotion or a vibe, I guess, as we say today in public life. But I think there's tangible signs all around us, I'll just mention a few, that hopefulness is warranted. Maybe it's the $150 million new mill in Holton, Maine, innovating a new line of product. They literally tore this mill down from the inside outside and shifted to something completely new that will keep them in business for decades and employ hundreds in Aroostook County. And you know that Nate at the microphone there, the plant manager, has a wicked sense of humor because that big red easy button was his idea. Maybe it's the $80 million new engineering building at Maine that just opened its doors a couple of weeks ago. Is that happening on your screens? Mine are blanking out. Maybe it's just mine. And what that's going to do for so many sectors of the Maine economy to train hundreds of engineers in the sectors that have the greatest need. Maybe it's the $10 million in workforce housing that our friends at Jackson Lab invested in with dozens of units, because we have opportunity, but if you can't live anywhere close to those opportunities, what good will it do all of us? And those stories of large enterprises, I think, are repeated hundreds and thousands of times across our state in small businesses in every corner as well. So what are the small things we're doing in this array of programs that we're privileged to run at MDF to try to sustain that momentum behind that hopefulness and keep our partners moving forward? Well, you all know us for our metrics, our measures of growth, driving the work we do based on what we really know for insights around the Maine economy. The next version will be out in mid-November. This here is technically not an official metric of the measures of growth, but as I was getting ready for today, I just thought it explained so much about our society that I had to throw it in here anyway. I'm not sure who those people are who think they're taking out the king cobra or the, the crocodile. But again, the data backs up this sense of momentum and hope. Maine in the purple line, the wages here growing. There was a math issue with that. Why did it grow initially? Because the lowest paying jobs in our state were the ones that were shut down that went away the most. And so the average went up for no other reason than what was no longer in our economy for opportunity. But it sustained itself. And more importantly, I think, the fact that it's overtaken our peer states is really important and really positive. Every state has these challenges and these headwinds, not just Maine. And so something is going on where we are doing better than our peers around the country, and we've been able to make progress even as we rebuild. Maine is still, each year, one of the absolute safest states in America, and I think we take that for granted in ways that Gabriella touched on so profoundly this morning of what our quality of life is like and can be like and why people want to move here. And 89% of Maine is trees. You can't even drive around Greater Portland without hitting a tree. And And the health of those sustainably managed forests is positive and is continuing to generate great opportunity for us. And it's closely connected to this. Well, we have a long ways to go. The dramatic progress that Maine has been able to make against our initial emissions and climate change goals. And I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. So how do we build on this? How do we keep this momentum going? Well, the most direct way that we at MDF work in community, of course, is one of the programs most of you know, the Maine Downtown Center, the Main Street Maine network across our state. And we have 10 of those gold stars on the map that are doing this work at a very intense level. And we have dozens of others that partner with us to do it in a somewhat less intense way, but in every corner of the state. And I think the thing we're most proud of on our MDF team is the commitment and the intentionality that it takes to truly work statewide is not easy to do in Maine. And a lot of our work had to persist side by side with helping these communities support residents and small business through this public health cataclysm, and at the same time imagine new ways of running their businesses, new ways of serving residents and visitors that could keep the economic vitality of their community going. And I think all of us have experienced that innovation firsthand. But even while we were doing that, we dared to think bigger. And when you dare to think bigger, it takes partners, as Gabriella said. And so with our partners at the Maine Community Foundation, who have often used this Main Street network as a way to reach many communities at once instead of one at a time, and our friends at the National Main Street program at Main Street America, we worked with 3 rural communities, with Monson, Lisbon, and Skowhegan, on visioning what does entrepreneurship really look like in a smaller population, smaller density, smaller service center environment, and not just here in places like Portland and Biddeford. And each community came up with just amazing strategies and low-hanging fruit to get moving, and courtesy of the foundation, the resources to actually move on them, which is, of course, so critical. And with the federal earmark that, courtesy of Senator King and Senator Collins, we just received, we're going to be working in 9 more communities across Maine on their rural entrepreneurship ecosystems. Just tremendously glad that we can do that work. And then we've been bringing that community work to some of the most stressed and distressed communities in Maine, those that have had paper mill closures or are dependent on a dominant mill presence and therefore at risk if something ever goes the other way. And we just saw the announcement this week in Jay with another mill closure that we might have suspected might come one day. But we have to equip each of these communities with the resilience of leadership. And we're thrilled that we're putting leaders through these distressed communities through our ICL program to build the connections and tools that they need to grapple challenges they may once have never even imagined. And we're bringing the insights from our Maine Downtown Center out to these communities to strategize about how they knit the core fabric of the most visible part of their community together in a fresh way. In the end, our work with For Maine, while it has a goal of growing this sector of our economy back by the billions of dollars and in innovative products by the many, and we're going to play a video as we head into lunch a bit later that will showcase so many of these really cool now and over the horizon things that you can make out of Maine forest. But in the end, it's about good jobs and vibrant communities for the people that live there. I don't think I've enjoyed any video work more over the past year than the video of this young woman forester doing her timber cruises with her, her infant strapped to her chest and the baby Bjorn. It's just awesome because that's what we need. We need fresh energy, we need fresh vision, and we need to come from the people in these communities. So For Maine continues strong. We've been at this for 6 years. This vision of continuing to build on our traditional strengths in pulp, paper, and lumber with new sets of products that we never even knew existed before. And what makes that possible is the unique collaboration. The unique collaboration between the 10 mill communities and the collaboration between those who support them and who support the businesses that are trying to drive this innovation. And the bottom line is this, and it comes back to Gabriella's message about climate. Everything that's made from fossil fuel-based materials can be made from a tree. The technology is there. It's a question of price and momentum. And as I like to say, one of my favorite stories in this space is a chemist and an architect in Belfast, Maine walk into a bar and they leave with a $130 million mill to make wood-based insulation to replace fiberglass in Madison, Maine. The mill is under reconstruction as we speak. Chinbro is working furiously on that site, and they hope to be open and cranking out product by this time next year. Just one example. And ultimately, our success in this area is part of our story of how Maine can drive response to climate change, probably more than anything else we can do as a state. The statistic is staggering. Right now, as we speak, 75% of the CO2 emissions in Maine are already offset by the trees growing on the stump and by the products we make out of it that sequester that carbon for the long term. 75%. How can we inch our way to 100%? And as I like to say, make sure that these aren't 2x4s anymore. They're portable carbon sequestration units. We are thrilled that over the past year plus, we have been bringing what we learned from working with the communities and the industry and higher ed on forest products to our friends in the fisheries, aquaculture, and kelp industries, all living things that come out of the ocean or that can be raised adjacent to it on land here in Maine. And we hope that that roadmap will be in front of you and in front of our whole state sometime in 2023 as everyone collaborates on it. I just wanted to mention in passing that, one segment of this industry, the biggest segment, is under tremendous stress and distress right now, and that's our lobster industry here in Maine, as they grapple with really onerous new regulations to protect whales, at the same time having a national watchdog say, you should just stop eating their produce while they grapple with that challenge. I was down in Stonington, Maine's largest lobstering port, on Saturday. And I was struck by what some of you know. Stonington is called Stonington, not Lobsterington. And the reason is because back in the day, that was where the Deer Isle Stonington granite was shipped from, and that was the epicenter of that economy. And I think when I look at that picture of the stone cutter on the harbor in Stonington, I think that strength and resilience is what will get that industry and get Maine through that challenge and all the others that we have. And finally, in the end, while it's about community and not just about individuals, communities are made up of individuals. And how do we nurture the aspirations and the capabilities and the competence of each individual in our economy with the skills they need? And as we've been working for years, most importantly for adult learners, because those are the predominant element of our workforce. A few thousand teenagers a year, and I have two 20-somethings and a teenager, but the workforce we have is primarily the workforce we're going to get, and how do we make sure each of them is positioned to realize their true potential? And then finally, none of that works without leadership. And so if our economy is a murmuration, our communities as a whole are murmurations, the leadership community too is a murmuration, as Gabriella said. And so we're thrilled that we are in the second cycle of bringing back ICL and Leadership Maine in person. You can do a lot of things in a lot of creative ways, but it's hard to truly humanize one another on a learning journey if you can't be together on that learning journey. And it's that leadership. Probably the thing I'm asked the most at MDF in recent years is, how do you do this in such a polarized environment and a polarized time? And part of it is you just can't quit. There is no choice. What's going to happen if we don't keep pushing and trying and nibbling to see where the commonality and the collaboration and the consensus is? But then sometimes, even when you least expect it, we prove that with enough leadership and resilience and persistence that we can come together on some pretty big stuff. How do we keep doing that on even more big stuff in our state and our country? And that's why we're so committed to the leadership development enterprise at MDF. And finally, we continue to have the great privilege of bringing those leadership development insights and those economic insights to the Maine legislature. And we're hopeful that we can bring back the vaunted bus tour for them this January and get them across a large swath of rural Maine to really understand these challenges and needs. So we're hopeful because we see the momentum, we see the investments, we see the collaboration in so many ways, large and small, in our state. But at the same time, we have to equip those policymakers and all of us with sharp insight about the challenges and the headwinds as well. And if you turn to this, I'm going to bring Dana Connors up here, our wonderful colleague, in a minute, to talk about what we've laid in front of Maine of what we need to continue to do to move forward in making Maine work. So this challenge is transcendent right now. Where are the workers? And it's so many pieces. The single biggest piece is we're the oldest state in the nation, and the gap is only widening. And we know in the country as well as Maine that half or 2/3 of what happens with people dropping out of the workforce is simply they decided to get out of it and they decided not to come back. Keeping older workers is key, and that's in our report. But at a certain point, that demographic catches up to us. And then it's so many other things, though, that are in our community. It's childcare, it's equity, it's inclusive workplaces, and those are in our report as well. You can see here, the red is bigger than the green. You don't have to be an economist to know that, and that's the deaths exceeding births. And it's attracting new people to our state, like Gabriella and many others, in the blue and the gray, that are going to be the key to our growth and success moving forward. And this puts it in pretty stark relief of what happened in the last census. The decline in our white population, because who was here was older and white. And that really big bar of some 45,000 plus new Mainers, increasingly diverse, 9.8%. Still the lowest in the country, can you believe it? But we are changing rapidly. And I think our ability to create communities still where no one is left behind, as the complexion of our communities change, quite literally, as well as figuratively, that's our biggest challenge and one that we have to do better on if we're going to create a truly inclusive economy. Because as those people have joined our economy, as the racial and ethnic diversity of our economy has increased, this gap is striking. It's about the same percentage-wise in Maine as it is across the country, but that's nothing to brag about. And so we have to make sure that new talent, new perspective, new voices, new faces equals equally shared opportunity. We have to make sure that more and more Mainers are moving the bar on this in terms of the credentials and degrees that will drive wages and prosperity for them and drive growth and innovation for the places that they work in. We made a lot of progress. We have to keep moving. And then R&D. Look at Maine, again, still the lowest bar in our set of comparison groups. And there are good things happening. I mentioned a few of them at the beginning of my remarks this afternoon. But it's taking those kernels of excellence in our state and really building a much broader fabric of innovation in Maine than we ever have before, and we're not there yet by a long shot. And then this one, Dana, and I think you're going to join me in just a second. I think this might be my last data point. We've been watching this for a while, because we used to say, listen, move to Maine, you won't make as much money, but it's more affordable to live here. No, it isn't. Unfortunately, not true anymore. And this has been creeping in the wrong direction for a while. And then you see the spike that we all perceived out there in the marketplace. Good if you sold a house, bad if you had to buy another one to replace it. Because most people in Maine cannot afford the median house, and that's true in 14 of our 16 counties as well. And then we couldn't do this work. There's many metrics on health and wellness, both physical and otherwise. But this one, in some ways, speaks to me the most. And I expect when we get the 21 and 22 data, it's going to be a lot worse because we're all coping with trauma, and kids are especially. So we need to get this number a lot lower, and we need to close the gap to the country. And we'll be talking more about this in our next release in November. So what are we going to do about it? That's where every quadrennium we have worked on this project, Making Maine Work, with our dear partners at the State Chamber of Commerce, and in the last couple of cycles with our partners at Educate Maine. And so we put out the product in mid-July this year, and Dana and I are going to tag team this a little bit, I think. And I would say, one of the first things I got to work on when I came to MDF, we were working on a project on new Mainers, immigrants, and Maine's workforce challenge. It was 2016. You might have remembered that immigration became a little bit of a political football in 2016. And I called up Dana and I said, Dana, would you make this project part of our Making Maine Work mantle and help share with us, both the limelight and the risk? And without hesitation, Dana said yes. because it was the right thing to do for the right reasons. Thank you for joining me today, Dana.
Oh, my pleasure, Yellow. Yeah, and thank you so much for this opportunity. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. I wanted to be sure to say good morning, and before it's over, I'll probably say goodbye, because this is probably going to be my last official appearance before MDF, as I will be leaving the chamber reluctantly. It's hard to leave something after you've been with it for 28 years, 29 years, and love just about every minute of it, but life has a way. I also get very sensitive when Yell reminds us that we are the oldest state in the nation. I try very hard not to take that personally, but it comes a time you can't deny what you can't deny, and such is the case here. Actually, I'm very proud to be able to speak to this initiative that came out of a conversation with the president of MDF back in 2009. That, of course, was Lori LaChance. And that initiative is what Yellow and I are speaking of today, making Maine work. And at that time, it was really just a concept, but it has lived a life and made a difference, and for two reasons. It speaks to issues, but it also represents a collaborative effort. And both the presidents, including Yellow and myself, are very proud of both what it has done, but also the way it has been done, that collaborative effort. We don't see enough of it, but when we do, we know it matters a lot and makes a difference. So let me just give you a sense of an insight into the fact that what Making Maine Work has done over the years, without getting into the detail of it, of course. We've had 3 surveys with recommendations for the gubernatorial candidates about to take office, so that those recommendations, based upon a survey, would be implemented. And we'll show you what that is. But let's start with where we are today. As he said, as Yellow said, we came together in the traditional way, as we had the previous 2, by a survey of businesses, a survey of nonprofits, and that survey turned out some real priorities. To begin with, as you've all seen from looking at your book, workforce has been a primary in the past 2 years, a priority. At that level, it was, as you will see in their book, we're picking the top 5, if we would, or 5 or 6, it's the entry-level worker. The second one, which was tied with the first place, to no one's surprise, was the energy cost. Then you came to skilled technical worker in third place. For the first time in any of our surveys, to at least get to the level of the top 5 or 6, was affordable housing. And you just heard in terms of what Yellow had to speak to that. We also followed that up with the cost of health insurance, and you're going to see how that has changed in just a moment. And dropping to 6th place was the availability of professional workers, and that was followed by high-speed internet. That were the priorities for which you're going to see in a moment recommendations were formed. But before we get to that point, let's just take a glimpse as to both what the priorities were in those previous 2 similar Making Maine report priorities. The first one we did was when Governor Paul LePage came into office in November of the year we released that. And at that time, the survey and the recommendation spoke to these priorities. Number 1 was the cost of health insurance. Number 2 was energy costs. Number 3 was state regulations. 4 was personal income tax. And 5 was Maine's transportation system. And when you think about it, those were a snapshot of the priorities within the economy that needed to be addressed at that time. Health insurance, energy cost, regulations, personal income tax, Maine's transportation system. The question always is, it's just another report, or does it matter? It mattered. Let me tell you why. Governor LePage was elected. You recall that's when Libby Mitchell ran, and that's when Elliott Cutler ran. He prevailed, and in his first year, here are the issues that he took on. He took on regulations right out of the starting gate. He also worked very diligently, didn't quite meet the goal that he wanted, but he reduced the personal income tax from 795 to 715. And then he took on transportation in ways that we had not seen before. $100 million a year and it has been pretty much followed suit. In 2018, again, it's a snapshot in time based upon survey of businesses, nonprofits, and so forth. Number one still remained health insurance, the cost of health insurance. But when workforce was 11, 14, and 18 in previous survey of that I just shared with you, look at it where they are today. That number 2 was availability of professional workers. 3 was another newcomer, high-speed internet service. And then the availability of skilled workforce, and finally, energy costs. Did it matter? That's the year that Governor Mills came into position as governor, and yes, it did make a difference. Out of that was born in 2019 the strategic plan that we'll speak to in a moment, proved to be very, very important, both in terms of the time, but think about how it helped guide us through the pandemic. It was instrumental, as a matter of fact. And as well as her efforts towards, we thought we were accomplishing a lot when we got a $15 million bond issue for high-speed internet. Today, there's close to $500 million. It really did get us started. So here we are today with availability of the entry-level worker. It came from 6th place to 1st place. And then energy cost has always remained in the top 5. Availability is skilled, number 3. 4 is the first time as I remeted affordable housing, followed by cost of health insurance. Health insurance has dropped, not because it's not important, it's only that other things rose to the level of a priority. Out of that came our recommendations, and I'm going to touch upon the very first one, although the first one really provides the essence of the next 2, and probably you could say for all 6 of the recommendations. The strategic plan is our first recommendation. The only thing that we say beyond making sure that it's part of our economic life and making sure that we do not give up on it, which is sometimes the case if governors change, the administration changes. But this has proven to be too important. It speaks to the very issues of today, and that are the following 2. Workforce and innovation are the 2 foundational features found within the strategic plan, but it reinforces what Yellow said a moment ago, the need for childcare, investment in housing, investment in broadband. Those things have proven to be essential. Who'd have thought that childcare and housing 10 years ago would have been a primary driver for meeting workforce needs today? It's paramount, it's obvious. So the strategic plan needs to be staying in place. Sure, we need to report on it regularly so people understand where we are, and we need to update it because it was a plan for 10 years and nothing ever stays the same. And so we recommend those 2 modifications. Yellow?
Thank you, Dana. And I got to say, leadership is about courage. And this summer, when we had 3 gubernatorial candidates in the room sequentially, 2/3 of them don't have their name on that plan. And Dana was relentless in pressing those other 2 candidates to get on board and commit to the fact that they were going to follow through. You can change the cover, change the tagline, whatever.
Yep.
But we're going to get nowhere if we go like this as a pendulum, as a state. I'm not going to get into the other 5, but the long version of the report, we have some available here. We have some on the table when you leave. It's on both of our websites. And we are around relentlessly. Dana and I are in northern Piscataquis County on Monday night telling the story about this plan. I was up in Aroostook County telling the story of it. Marty Groman's got me talking to every Rotary in Saco Biddeford in a couple of weeks. So we'd love to be out there. But we have so many venues and so many collaborations just that we're part of, let alone that all you are part of, to help move that forward. So thank you, Dana, for this partnership. And I think really in the end, the substance of the work is great. But what's been amazing has been the relationship around it.
I would agree with that, totally.
So,
yeah, I do want to take another minute, so I know Yellow, and I didn't particularly follow his direction, but gave me 60 seconds for each of those things I was supposed to talk about. I've gone beyond it, but I want to ask you to indulge me for another couple minutes. And that is to be able to say what he just said, but take a little longer in saying it. I've got to tell you, you have a very special organization here in Maine Development Foundation. I cannot say enough good about it. Just think about all of the issues that you have on your plate and the fact that what you are doing really does make a difference. So I stand before you expressing appreciation and gratitude for Maine Development Foundation for not just what you do, but for the way you do it. When you think of the measures of growth, when I think of Maine Spark, when I think of the strategic plan, when I think of making Maine work, when I think of the leadership, the forestry, the downtowns, and all the things that you do, that's an incredible expression of success in what you do. When you think of all of those initiatives and how they've been expressed in terms of us working together in a collaborative way, that defines success. I've been around long enough to know that the strength of all of us far exceeds any one of us. MDF does that, they believe in it, they practice it, and I thank them for that. And indeed, as our speaker said, we are a community in Maine. Every day, for every issue, on every challenge, we show that. And I, too, am very helpful. And I, too, thank all of you. Thank you.